Let's drift back in time. Not just a few centuries, but thousands of years. Imagine a world before houses had doors, before treasures were hidden in chests, before anyone even thought of a lock. Life was open, exposed, and safety was more a matter of trust than technology. But people are inventive, and sooner or later, someone had the thought, what if I could keep this safe, not just by watching it, but by closing it away? That little thought was the seed of locks and keys. Before I take you deeper into this story, let me welcome you here. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our slow journeys through history. And if you feel like sharing, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from. Is it late at night? Are you already tucked in bed? Or maybe it's morning, and you're listening as you start the day. I always love to see how these stories reach people in different corners of the world. Now, back to locks. The first locks weren't really locks at all. They were knots, ropes, and bars of wood. A rope tied around the entrance to a hut. A heavy beam slid across a door. It wasn't elegant, but it was enough to send a message. This is closed. This is mine. And yet, ropes can be untied. Beams can be lifted. People wanted something better. Something that required a secret to open. That's when the earliest locks appeared in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt. Archaeologists have found wooden pin locks that are over 4,000 years old. Imagine them. A wooden bolt sliding into place, held firm by little pins that dropped into holes. To move the bolt, you needed a special stick with pegs, the first key. Without it, the pins stayed stubbornly in place. With it, the bolt slid open smoothly. A simple idea, but powerful. And think about the feeling of the first person who ever turned a key in a lock. The soft click, the smooth release, the knowledge that what was closed to others was open to you. That little sound must have been deeply satisfying. It still is today. We all know the comfort of locking a door at night and hearing that tiny signal that we are safe. Of course, locks weren't only for homes. Ancient Egyptians used them for storage rooms, granaries, even for temples. A key wasn't just a tool, it was a symbol. To hold one meant you had authority, responsibility, sometimes even power. Imagine being a temple guard, with a ring of wooden keys clinking at your side. Each key opened a door to something valuable or sacred. As time passed, locks grew more sophisticated. The Romans improved them with metal, making smaller keys that could be carried discreetly. Some were even worn as jewelry rings, with little teeth that could open a matching lock. To wear your key on your finger was to carry your security everywhere you went. And yet, even the finest locks were never perfect. Thieves and clever minds always looked for ways to outwit them. In a way, locks are like puzzles, and every puzzle invites someone to solve it. That tension between the maker of the lock and the one who tries to break it has stretched through all of history. But in the quiet of night, when a door was closed, a lock in place, and a key tucked under a pillow, there must have been comfort. The sense that, for now, the world outside could wait. Behind the door was warmth, firelight, family, sleep. And perhaps that's the deeper story of locks and keys. Not just the mechanics, but the feeling of safety, the pause between worry and rest. A lock says, "This is my space, my time, my peace." And a key whispers, "You are the one who belongs here." So next time you hear the small click of a lock turning, remember that you're part of a story that began thousands of years ago. A story of humans learning how to shape safety with wood, with metal, and with imagination. And as you drift off tonight, picture that ancient wooden lock in the hands of a craftsman in Mesopotamia. The careful carving, the smooth sanding, the satisfaction as the bolt slid shut for the first time. He, too, was seeking the same thing you are now: rest, peace, a place where the world could not intrude. And if we linger on this idea a little longer, you'll notice something. Locks aren't really about walls or doors or bolts of wood. They are about trust. They are about the invisible line between what is inside and what is outside, between what is yours and what is the world's. In the very beginning, before anyone shaped a key out of metal, people already knew the feeling of wanting to keep things safe. Imagine a small clay jar of grain, stored in the corner of a hut. It was food for the coming days, precious enough to mean the difference between hunger and survival. A simple lid might be placed on top, but lids can be lifted. A heavy stone might cover the jar, but stones can be moved. And so, slowly, the thought grew. What if I had something only I could open? That thought alone changed history. In Egypt, more than 3,000 years ago, people carried wooden keys half the size of their arms. They were clumsy things, carved carefully, shaped to match a particular lock. To us, they might seem heavy, impractical, but to those who held them, they were treasures. To have a key was to have control, to keep others out, to keep yourself in. And maybe you've noticed this too. There is something strangely calming about holding a key, its weight in your palm, its teeth cut in small patterns. You might even carry one in your pocket now, and perhaps without thinking, you touch it from time to time, as if to remind yourself, I can return home. I belong somewhere. That small piece of metal carries with it reassurance. The Romans refined the art further. Their locks were not just functional, but works of beauty. Some keys were small enough to wear as pendants, or hidden in rings. Imagine someone twisting a ring on their finger, the tiny notches fitting perfectly into a lock, releasing a door with ease. There is a certain elegance in that, isn't there? A blend of security and jewelry, of secrecy and pride. But locks are not just about doors or chests. They are about people, about the moment when one person places trust in another. A merchant handing a key to his apprentice. A family keeping a key on a cord around the neck of the eldest child. A priest locking away sacred scrolls, knowing that the key means protection not only of parchment, but of tradition, of memory, of meaning. And here is something worth pausing over. Every lock, no matter how strong, is also a story of fear. Because a lock is never made unless there is something to fear losing. A lock is a response to the worry that someone, somewhere, might take what you treasure. And yet, once the lock is closed, once the key is turned, the fear softens. The heart slows down. The mind allows itself to rest. That is the quiet gift of locks. Not just keeping others out, but letting us finally close our eyes. Imagine it now. A darkened room in ancient Rome. The streets outside still echo with footsteps, the occasional cry of a seller, the rumble of a cart. But inside, a small iron key turns with a click. The door is closed. The world is kept at bay. Inside, a lamp burns low, shadows play on the walls, and a family lies down to rest. You can almost hear it, can't you? The key sliding into its place, the lock embracing it, like a puzzle solved. And then, silence, safety, a pause in the day. And perhaps, if you let yourself listen even closer, you might realize that every time we lock a door today, we are echoing that same rhythm. The rhythm of an Egyptian farmer closing his storehouse. The rhythm of a Roman merchant securing his stall. The rhythm of a medieval family sliding a heavy bolt across the wooden door before climbing into bed. It is an old rhythm, a human rhythm, one that whispers, "Now you can rest." As the centuries drifted forward, the world of locks changed again. The Middle Ages arrived, and with them came iron, stone fortresses, and the idea that security could be monumental. Picture a medieval village at dusk. The sun is sinking, bells are tolling, and one by one the townsfolk pull close their heavy wooden doors. Across the beams of those doors, iron bolts slide into place, and keys now forged from strong metal turn in thick, groaning locks. These locks were not delicate things. They were weighty, noisy, almost alive with the sound of scraping metal on metal. To close one, was to feel the resistance of iron, the stubbornness of forged teeth meeting their match. And to open one was a ritual, a slow turning, a creak, a click. That sound became part of daily life, as familiar to them as the rustle of straw on the floor or the crackle of the hearth fire. Keys themselves grew larger, more elaborate. Some were the length of a man's hand, heavy enough to hang at the belt like a tool of honor. Blacksmiths didn't only make them functional, they decorated them too, twisting iron into patterns, curling the bow of the key into loops and spirals. To carry such a key was more than convenience. It was a statement. I have something worth locking away. In great castles, the symbolism ran even deeper. The keeper of the keys was an important figure, sometimes second only to the Lord himself. Imagine walking through the stone corridors of a fortress, hearing the faint jingle of keys at a guard's side. Each one opened a chamber, storerooms, armories, treasuries. Some keys opened rooms where candles never burned out, where scrolls and relics were kept under lock and watchful eye. To hold those keys was to carry responsibility, a trust as heavy as the iron they were made of. And yet, just like in ancient times, locks weren't perfect. Clever hands always searched for ways around them. A hidden pick, a bit of patience, a listening ear pressed against the wood. The contest between those who lock and those who unlock continued. But for most people, the lock did what it was meant to do. It gave peace of mind. Think for a moment of a small medieval home. The family inside has finished their meal, bread and stew, eaten by the glow of fire. Children curled together on straw bedding, while outside the night grows deep. Before lying down himself, the father steps to the door. He takes the iron key from a nail on the wall, fits it into the lock, and with a slow turn, secures the house. The sound echoes softly, metal against metal, before fading into quiet. And in that sound, the family feels safety. Not absolute, not perfect, but enough. Enough to let them sleep. And perhaps you, listening now, can feel a little of that same comfort. The world outside may be busy, noisy, unpredictable. But the simple act of closing, turning, locking it, carries a message older than history itself. A message that says, this place is yours. This moment is safe. You may rest. As centuries rolled onward, the world grew more curious, more inventive. The Renaissance dawned, and with it came not only art and music, but also craftsmanship that touched even the humble lock and key. Imagine a locksmith in a quiet workshop somewhere in Italy. Outside, the streets are alive with the bustle of merchants and the laughter of children, but inside, there is only the steady scrape of a file against iron. He bends over his work, shaping teeth so precise, so delicate, that only one key in the world will fit the lock he is building. Locks of this time were no longer just barriers. They became puzzles, intricate systems of levers and wards, hidden tricks of metal that turned a simple keyhole into a guardian of secrets. Some locks were so elaborate, they were considered works of art, engraved with vines, inlaid with silver, even crafted in shapes of birds or flowers. To own such a lock was to own not just security, but beauty. Keys, too, transformed. No longer the simple, heavy bars of the Middle Ages, they grew slender, elegant, designed to slip easily into pockets or to hang discreetly from a chain. Some were shaped with ornate bows, curling like the petals of roses, a reminder that even something so practical could be lovely. But beneath the beauty was the same old comfort, the same soft click, the same reassurance. To turn a Renaissance key was still to whisper to yourself, "Here I am safe." And with safety came trust. Banks began to appear in European cities, places where merchants deposited their coins and documents. The vaults were fitted with locks that seemed unbreakable, their keys guarded with care. Imagine stepping into one of those early banks. The air cool and still, the shelves lined with chests. Each chest closed, each lock heavy, each key a silent promise. Even kings and queens, placed their faith in locks. In palaces, treasures were kept behind iron doors. Court locksmiths became men of importance, sworn to secrecy, skilled in designs so clever that only a chosen few could open them. Holding such a key was not just a matter of metal, it was a matter of trust, of loyalty, of honor. And yet, despite the grandness, the essence never changed. In the simplest cottage or the grandest palace, the act was the same. A door closed, a key turned, a moment of quiet safety. A mother tucking her children into bed, turning the key in a wooden door. A merchant setting aside his ledgers and locking his chest before sleep. A guard making one last round, sliding a key into an iron gate and hearing it click shut against the night. All of them, across centuries and lands, shared the same small ritual, the same sound that told the mind, the day is finished, the night is here, and now it is time to rest. As the world entered the age of industry, locks and keys followed along. Iron gave way to steel. Workshops grew into factories. What once had been the work of a single craftsman at his bench became the output of machines, precise and countless. In the 19th century, names like Chubb and Yale became known across the world. These were not just families, but innovators who reshaped how locks worked. They invented mechanisms that were sturdier, more reliable, less easy to trick. The famous Yale lock, with its tiny pins hidden deep inside, was born in this age. For the first time, a small key could turn a mechanism of surprising complexity, and doors everywhere could close with confidence. Imagine the cities of that era, the clatter of horse-drawn carriages on cobblestones, the rising smoke of factories, and in the evening, as shops closed, the turning of thousands of keys. Shopkeepers leaning down to fit small brass keys into shining locks, the click echoing in the growing quiet of the street. It was a chorus of closure, a nightly ritual of security. And inside homes, too, locks became common. A family in London or New York might keep their valuables in a sturdy iron safe, the kind with wheels on the handle and heavy bolts hidden inside. Opening it was an act of patience, the turn of a key, sometimes the spin of a dial, the slow release of tumblers clicking into place. And when it opened, there was reassurance. Papers, letters, coins, all still there, waiting. Hotels embraced locks as well. Imagine checking into a grand hotel in the early 1900s, the lobby filled with polished wood and chandeliers. At the desk, the clerk hands you a heavy brass key, attached to a long tag so it won't be lost. That key is not only access to your room, it is a token of trust. You carry it with you through the city streets, and when you return, tired, you fit it into the door and turn. A small click, and you are inside, in your private world. And in small towns, in quiet farmhouses, the ritual was the same. A farmer finishing his chores, bolting the barn doors, turning the key in the lock before heading inside. A mother closing the door of her kitchen cabinet, where jars of preserves were kept safe behind glass and iron. Even children carried tiny padlocks for boxes of toys or diaries with secrets. Everywhere, the rhythm of closing and locking spread, the key in the pocket, the lock on the door, the quiet signal. Now you may rest. The 20th century brought still more. Car locks and ignition keys, tiny things you could carry on a ring. Apartment buildings with rows of identical locks, each one belonging to a different home, a different life. Schools, offices, lockers, all turning on that same simple idea that began thousands of years before. One thing closed, one thing opened, with a secret shape of metal. And with each turn, with each soft click, there was the same comfort. The world outside might be busy, noisy, uncertain, but behind the lock, behind the key, was calm. But long before the modern world of cars and apartment doors, keys had already carried meanings far deeper than their function. To understand them, we have to drift back, much further, into the oldest uses of locks. One of the earliest was sacred. In Mesopotamia and Egypt, keys guarded temples. These were not temples open to every passerby. They were places where offerings were stored, where idols were dressed in fine cloth, where incense drifted upward like prayer. Archaeologists have uncovered great wooden doors with grooves where bolts once slid into place, and fragments of bronze that may have been early wards. The locks themselves were simple, but the act of closing them was weighty. A priest turning a key at dusk was not only shutting a chamber, he was sealing the boundary between the human and the divine. The key was, in that moment, part of the ritual itself. From temples, the idea spread to power. In palaces, overseers carried keys, not only for storerooms of grain or jars of oil, but as visible badges of authority. Ancient Egyptian reliefs even depict figures with long wooden keys held upright, like staffs of office. They were impractical objects, heavy and oversized, but perhaps that was intentional. A large key was hard to hide. It proclaimed to all, "This man holds responsibility." To be entrusted with one was a mark of status, a reminder that the owner had access where others did not. And beyond temples and palaces lay the roads. Merchants, moving along dusty tracks between cities, carried their livelihoods in wooden chests. Many of these chests survive in fragments, traces of sliding bolts, impressions of bronze clasps that once held fast. The locks were fragile by modern standards, but they mattered because they allowed a traveler to sleep. Imagine stopping at a caravanserai, laying down beside the fire, and knowing your goods were fastened shut, if only by a thin bar of wood and a curious key hidden in your cloak. The lock might not defeat a determined thief, but it created a pause, and sometimes a pause was all the owner needed. In fortresses, the story grew stranger still. Hidden doors, secret corridors. Medieval architects built passageways that curled through walls, narrow staircases that opened onto battlements or gardens. Many of these were closed by locks of peculiar design, made so only a trusted few could open them. Archaeologists have found locks from castles in France and Germany, with keyholes disguised in carvings, their wards cut in patterns too complex for common hands. To slip such a key into such a lock was to step not only through a door, but into secrecy itself. Yet keys were not always practical at all. Some were worn as charms. In Roman graves, tiny bronze keys have been uncovered, placed beside the dead. Scholars believe they were symbolic tools to unlock the afterlife, or to protect the soul on its journey. Keys appear in amulets too, small enough to wear around the neck, meant to ward off misfortune. A child might carry one for protection. A bride might receive one as a token of fertility, as if the key could unlock the future. These little objects had no lock to fit, but they still carried power, not mechanical, but spiritual. And then there were the darker uses. Keys for prisons, for chains, for the iron collars of slaves. In ruins of Roman camps, heavy locks have been found that were clearly designed not for doors, but for shackles. The men who held those keys held not only tools, but lives. For prisoners, the rattle of keys in the corridor was a sound of dread or hope. The same turn of the same lock could mean another day of captivity or sudden freedom. What unites all of these is not the mechanism itself, whether wood or bronze, simple pin or iron ward, but the feeling they created. To hold a key was to carry responsibility. To hear a lock close was to feel safety, or confinement, or reverence. To trust a key to another person was to hand over part of one's world. And across the centuries, through temples and palaces, through caravans and castles, through amulets and prisons, the small sound of a key turning has always meant the same thing: a boundary drawn between inside and outside, between danger and safety, between what is open to the world and what must be kept apart. Archaeology gives us glimpses of this long history, as if the earth itself has been holding the memory of locks. In Mesopotamia, among the ruins of Nineveh, Excavations revealed wooden fragments of what were once sliding bolt locks. The wood itself has long since darkened, softened by centuries of soil. But the shape is still clear, a bolt hollowed with small holes, and traces of pins that once dropped into place. To move the bolt, you needed a key carved with matching pegs. Without it, the pins refused to lift. It is astonishing. Really a system already sophisticated 4,000 years ago, hidden in wood that was never meant to last this long. In Egypt, tomb paintings show servants carrying keys nearly as long as their arms. Some were carved in simple lines, others decorated with symbols. These images are not fantasies. Fragments of such keys have been found, still sturdy after millennia. When you look at them behind glass in a museum, you can imagine the feel of one in your hand, awkward, heavy, but strangely reassuring. It makes you realize that the desire to lock and unlock, to create safety through ritual, is older than most of the civilizations we remember. The Romans, too, left behind their secrets. In the ashes of Pompeii, archaeologists found bronze keys small enough to wear on rings. Some are delicate, thin, their teeth cut with tiny precision. They once belonged to households where locks were not crude, but clever, using wards and levers to keep doors closed. Imagine the hand of a Roman matron turning such a ring at her door, the bronze cool against her skin, the soft click granting her privacy in a bustling city. Far to the east, in China, locks took on shapes both practical and symbolic. Bronze padlocks have been uncovered shaped like animals, fish, tigers, turtles, their bodies forming the case of the lock itself. To us, they look almost like toys, but inside them were working mechanisms, small puzzles of levers and springs. A merchant might have fastened one to a chest, not only for security but also as a charm. The fish might symbolize abundance, the turtle long life. These locks protected both possessions and hopes. Even in Europe's cold soil, traces remain. In Viking settlements, iron keys have been found, some with simple bits, others with ornate bows shaped into loops and crosses. Keys in graves, laid beside women, perhaps marking their role as keepers of the household. To the Vikings, a key was more than a tool. It was the emblem of a wife's authority over food stores and valuables, her sign of stewardship. To bury her with a key was to honor that role, to say, she held the household together. Across all these finds, what stands out is not only the ingenuity, but the persistence. Locks rot, metal corrodes, yet the idea remains visible in fragments. Bolts with pinholes, keys with cut teeth. The details are fragile, but the concept is eternal. A lock is always a promise that something is kept apart, that entry requires permission, that there is a line only a chosen person may cross. And so when we trace these remains, wooden bolts from Mesopotamia, bronze rings from Pompeii, animal-shaped padlocks from China, iron keys from Viking graves, we see not just objects, but echoes of lives. We see a man sleeping easier on a caravan road, a woman closing her home in Pompeii before the ash fell, a Viking matron turning her household chest at dusk, each one bound to that small familiar act, sliding a bolt, turning a key, drawing safety closer. Over time, the key slipped free from the lock and became an idea. It was no longer only a tool of wood or bronze, but a sign carried in art, in myth, in ritual. It began to mean power itself. In Egypt, the long wooden keys drawn in reliefs were not only practical, they were painted large, in the hands of overseers, because the image of a key spoke for authority. To control the grain was to control survival, and the key made that visible. In Rome, the language itself reveals the link. The Latin word clavis, a key, also meant a clue, a solution, the thing that unlocks. The emperor was said to hold the keys of empire not in the literal sense of a ring jangling at his belt, but in the sense of access, The one who held the keys could grant passage or forbid it. And across many cultures, the key reached even higher, into the heavens. The Babylonians imagined gods as gatekeepers of the skies, holding keys that opened the doors of dawn, releasing the sun each morning. In later traditions, keys became symbols of spiritual passage, the keys to wisdom, the keys to paradise. In Christian art, St. Peter is painted with two great keys, one of gold and one of silver, said to open and close the gates of heaven. To carry them was to embody divine trust. But it was not only kings and saints who carried symbolic keys. In medieval towns, when a new city wall was finished, the keys of the gates were often presented in ceremony to the ruler. Great, oversized keys of iron, sometimes as long as an arm, forged not to fit a lock but to display allegiance. They were gifts of submission, declarations that the city now belonged to him. Even today, the key to the city is given as an honor, a gesture born from that same tradition. There is something deeply human in this transformation. A key is small, unassuming, often overlooked in daily life. Yet across centuries it became a sign for things immense: power over people, authority from the divine, entry into eternal realms. And perhaps this symbolism feels natural because of the act itself. To turn a key is to decide, to open or to close, to allow or to forbid. It is the quiet, physical expression of choice. And in that simple gesture, it is easy to see why people began to imagine gods and rulers with keys in hand. So when we look at the fragments in museums, the bronze, the iron, the carved wood, we are not only looking at ancient tools, we are looking at the roots of an idea that still lingers in language, in ceremony, in belief. The key as a sign of threshold, the lock as a symbol of boundary, the act of turning as the moment of passage. For every grand temple door, there were dozens of smaller locks, built not for ceremony but for daily use. Archaeology shows this in fragments: tiny padlocks of iron found in farmhouses, simple wooden bolts from huts, keys worn smooth from years of handling. They remind us that the idea of locking and unlocking was not limited to palaces. It was part of the rhythm of common life. In the small houses of Roman towns, for example, archaeologists have uncovered chests with iron fittings. These weren't treasure chests in the sense we imagine, glittering with gold, but modest containers. Inside were clothes, tools, or bundles of wool. Yet even these ordinary goods were protected by locks. A bronze key, sometimes no bigger than a finger, would be tied with a cord and kept close at hand. A woman of the house might wear it at her belt, the little weight against her hip a reminder of responsibility. To turn that key was not an act of power over kingdoms, it was the daily care of her household. In medieval villages, locks grew heavier, made of wrought iron. Blacksmiths shaped them by hand, and no two were alike. A farmer might commission one for his barn door, the curved bow of the key simple, the bit cut with wide notches. Each evening, after the animals were fed and the tools put away, the door would be swung shut, the lock clicked into place. The sound was part of the night, like the barking of dogs or the fading light of the hearth. And children, too, knew locks. Small padlocks were sometimes given to them for wooden boxes where they stored pebbles, carved figures, or scraps of cloth. These were not valuable in the eyes of adults, but to a child they were treasures. The act of closing the box with a lock, slipping the key into a pocket, created the same comfort their parents felt with barns and chests. To know something was theirs alone. There were keys for craftsmen as well. In guild halls across Europe, great wooden chests held the collective wealth of the trade coins, documents, charters. These chests often had more than one lock, each with a different key, so that no single man could open it. A carpenter might hold one key, a weaver another, a blacksmith a third. Only together could they unlock their common trust. The clinking of several keys at once was the sound of cooperation, of shared responsibility. Even in humble spaces, The symbolism of keys crept quietly in. In Viking households, iron keys have been found in women's graves, laid on their belts. Scholars believe this marked their role as keepers of the home, the ones who held authority over stores and property. The key was not only a tool, but an emblem of dignity, of order, of care. So while locks in palaces spoke of power, and keys in temples spoke of faith, the small locks of households spoke of something else entirely, the ordinary hope for safety. A farmer's tools, a woman's chest, a child's keepsakes, each one closed by a lock, each one opened by a key. And in those little acts, the same comfort repeated across centuries, that the world outside could wait just for a while life inside remained safe and still. Let us drift now, not into homes or castles, but into temples, because in the ancient world, locks and keys were not only about possessions, they were also about the sacred. Picture yourself in Mesopotamia, thousands of years ago. The air is heavy with incense, the sun burning above clay walls, and in the heart of the city stands a temple. Its doors are tall, its chambers mysterious, and within are treasures not of gold alone, but of belief itself, statues of gods, scrolls of rituals, offerings from the people. Such a place could not simply remain open to anyone, and so there was a lock, and with it, a key. But this key was no ordinary thing. It was not tucked into a pocket, not hidden beneath a pillow. It was carried by a priest or a guardian, someone chosen for trust. To hold that key was to hold access to the divine. The turning of it, the sound of wood or bronze sliding into place, was more than a mechanical act. It was a ceremony. Imagine the priest at dusk, when the city grew quiet. He approaches the great doors, heavy and carved. In his hand, the key glints faintly in the last light of day. He slides it into the lock, turns it with a slow, deliberate motion. The door closes, the bolts fall into place, and in that moment, the temple becomes not just a building, but a sealed vessel of holiness. The people outside know that what is locked within is safe. Safe from thieves, safe from strangers, safe even from casual eyes. And to them, that key is not just a piece of metal or wood, it is a promise. A promise that the sacred remains untouched until the right hands open it again. We can almost hear the sound, can't we? The scrape of the lock, the faint echo as the doors seal shut, and then silence. The temple resting in the dark, like a sleeper waiting for dawn. And so, in those ancient days, the key itself became a kind of prayer, a small object, yes, but filled with meaning. To turn it was to trust, to close it was to protect, to carry it was to bear responsibility. In a way, every lock in a temple was not only a tool of security, but a bridge between the human and the divine. If we wander further into the ancient world, we find that keys were never only tools. They were symbols, signs of authority, of rank, of trust. Picture Egypt, beneath the bright sun, where temples and storehouses lined the riverbanks. There, keys were sometimes as long as a man's forearm, carved from wood or shaped from bronze. Heavy things, awkward to carry. But that was the point. Their very size announced importance. To see a person walking with such a key was to know, this one commands access. The key was a visible badge of power. Not everyone could hold one. Only the overseer of grain, the keeper of weapons, the guardian of treasure. A worker in the fields might carry a basket, a soldier, a spear, but the man with the key carried authority itself. Imagine him in the evening, walking through a granary, the air thick with the smell of stored barley. At his side hangs the long, clumsy key. Workers glance at it as he passes. They know that with a twist of that object, the doors to food supplies could be opened or locked. In a world where hunger was never far away, that was no small responsibility. And in palaces too, keys were statements. The steward who wore them on a ring at his belt was marked as trustworthy, close to the king or the lord. The clinking sound of keys was more than metal against metal. It was a sound of rank, of privilege, of belonging to the inner circle. It is curious, isn't it, that a simple object could mean so much. That a piece of carved wood or cast bronze could carry more weight than jewels. But in truth, it was never the key alone that mattered. It was what the key represented. The right to open, the right to close, the right to decide who could pass and who must remain outside. Even today, when we hear the word key, we often think not only of doors, but of importance. The key to a city, the key to knowledge, the key to success. This echoes that ancient instinct that to possess the key is to hold power. But long before it became a metaphor, it was a simple reality. In the hands of a chosen few, a key was a symbol of rank, a visible mark that said, "I guard what others cannot reach." So when you imagine those old, heavy keys, perhaps dangling from the belt of an Egyptian overseer, or gleaming in the hand of a Mesopotamian steward, think of them not just as tools, but as emblems. Emblems of trust, emblems of power, and emblems of the quiet responsibility that came with being the one who could lock and unlock. Now let us leave the temples and palaces behind and step onto the dusty roads of the ancient world. Roads where merchants walked, caravans stretched across the horizon, and treasures were carried not in vaults of stone, but in humble wooden chests. Picture a trader moving slowly with his goods. The sun is hot, the wheels of his cart creak, the animals snort as they pull their load. In that cart sits a chest. It is not very large, not very ornate, but inside it lies his livelihood cloth, beads, spices, or perhaps a handful of silver coins. And across the front of that chest is a lock. The lock itself might be simple: a sliding bar of wood, a clasp of bronze, a pin that could only be lifted with the right key. And the key, where would he keep it? Perhaps on a cord around his neck, resting against his chest so that he could feel it with every step, or tucked into the folds of his belt, hidden yet always near. The key was not just a tool. It was his reassurance, his companion, his invisible guard. At night, when the caravan stopped to rest, fires glowing against the desert wind, he would check that chest. He would slip the key into the lock, hear the small scrape as it turned, lift the lid just enough to see that everything was still there. Then, carefully, he would lower it again, turn the key back, and feel the familiar click. Only then could he stretch out by the fire, close his eyes, and let sleep come. And perhaps you can imagine the quiet sound of keys in such a place. The faint clink of bronze in the still night air. To the trader, that sound was comfort, proof that his goods, his hard work, his future were not slipping away. But locks on chests were not only for merchants. Families too, in villages and towns, used them for their most precious things. A box of jewelry passed from mother to daughter. A chest of clothes woven over years. A container of scrolls or letters. To close it with a lock was to draw a circle of safety around memory itself. There is something deeply human about this, isn't there? The chest, the lock, the key, a pattern that repeats through centuries. A man on the road with his trade, a woman at home with her dowry, both turning a key, both hearing that tiny sound, both feeling the same relief. Now it is safe. And so, while temples held sacred keys, and overseers wore keys as symbols of power, the humble chest showed another truth, that locks were not only for kings and priests, but also for ordinary lives. For the traveler on the road, for the family in a small home, for anyone who wished to protect what they cherished and rest a little easier beneath the stars. Imagine, if you will, a vast stone fortress. Its halls echo with footsteps, torches flicker along the walls, and behind one tapestry, if you know where to press, lies a door. To most, it looks like part of the stone, but for the one who carries the right key, it is an entrance, The lock on such a door was not meant for the eyes of strangers. It was made small, discreet, often disguised. Perhaps it lay just behind a hanging cloth, or low, near the floor where only a trusted guard would kneel. The key itself might look strange too, with teeth cut in patterns unlike any other. To slip it into place and turn it was to perform a secret ritual. And what would lie beyond? Sometimes storage, a place where documents or valuables were kept, away from prying eyes. Sometimes escape routes, narrow corridors leading out of the castle and into the forest, for use in desperate times. Sometimes private rooms, where lords and ladies might meet unseen, their footsteps muffled by stone. Picture the moment. The corridor silent, the torchlight soft. A man stands by the hidden door. He glances over his shoulder, makes sure he is alone. Then, slowly, he draws the key from a pouch. The metal feels cold, heavier than its size. He fits it into the secret lock, turns, and hears the faintest click. The door opens just enough, groaning as if the stones themselves are whispering. And then, he slips inside, leaving the outer world behind. These locks were not only about security, they were about secrecy, about keeping knowledge, or pathways, or meetings confined to a chosen few. To hold such a key was not just to hold power, but to carry a secret within your pocket. And there is something strangely soothing in imagining these hidden places. The quiet of stone passages, the air cool and still, the sound of the lock clicking closed once more. Inside, silence. Outside, the world continues, unaware. In this way, locks became not just protectors of treasure, but protectors of mystery. They drew a line, not only between mine and yours, but between known and unknown, seen and unseen. And perhaps, if you close your eyes now, you can almost picture yourself walking those shadowed corridors, a torch in one hand, a key in the other, the quiet certainty that only you know what lies behind the locked door. And with that certainty comes the same feeling our ancestors must have known, a sense of calm, of control, of belonging to a secret world. In many ancient cultures, people carried little keys not to open doors or chests, but to ward off misfortune. They were amulets, talismans, small companions that traveled everywhere. Picture a bronze key, no longer than a finger, hanging from a leather cord around someone's neck. It doesn't match any lock. Its teeth are symbolic, not practical. And yet, to the one who wears it, it holds power. The belief that it can lock out evil, or unlock good fortune. Children were sometimes given such charms, tiny keys tied at the waist, thought to keep away sickness. Merchants wore them on belts, believing they would unlock the path to wealth. Lovers exchanged them as tokens, whispers that the key opened not a door, but a heart. There's something gentle about this image, isn't there? A traveler in a distant land, his possessions few, yet among them a small key he never parts with. Each night, when he lies down to rest, he touches it, reassured by its presence. Not because it opens anything physical, but because it feels like safety, like an invisible lock between him and the troubles of the world. And these charms could be beautifully made. Some were plain, simple bits of metal. Others were ornate, carved with patterns of vines or circles, symbols of eternity. Some were even placed in graves, keys laid beside the dead as if to help them unlock the way to the afterlife. Imagine that now, a tomb sealed in silence, the body resting, and at the side, a little key, waiting, patient, as if ready to open a door no living hand could see. The belief gave peace. And that peace mattered as much as any iron lock on a door, perhaps more, because a true amulet is not about walls or barriers, but about the quiet comfort in the mind. And isn't that what keys have always offered? A sense of control, a line between the safe and the unsafe. Whether fitting into a lock or worn as a charm, the key has always whispered the same thing: You are protected. You may rest now. Imagine an ancient fortress, its walls thick with stone. Deep inside, narrow corridors lead to cells small, dark spaces where iron bars guard the way. The air is cold, heavy with silence, except for the echo of footsteps. And then, the faint metallic sound, the rattle of keys. The jailer appears, a ring of heavy iron keys at his side. They clink as he walks, each one shaped for a different lock. To him, the keys are tools of duty. To the prisoners listening in the dark, they are something more, symbols of fate. The turning of one key could mean release, or it could mean another long night behind the bars. Picture the ritual. The jailer kneels before a rusted lock. He selects the right key, slides it in, turns slowly. The scrape of iron against iron fills the silence. Then the door opens with a groan. For one prisoner, this sound might mean freedom. For another, only a shift in chains, a movement from one cell to another. And outside the prisons, locks and keys bound people in other ways. Shackles on the wrists of captives, collars on slaves, chains closed with small but stubborn locks. A single key could control the movement of a life. To hold it was to hold power, terrible and complete. Yet even here, there is a strange duality. For those locked away, the key was fear, but also hope. Because so long as a lock existed, so too did the possibility of it being opened. The same sound, that faint, familiar click, could mean despair or deliverance, depending on whose hand held the key. And in this, we see the other side of locks in ancient times. Not only protection, not only treasure, not only sacred spaces or charms, but also control, authority, sometimes cruelty. The key was both guardian and captor, both friend and foe. Imagine, though, the silence after the jailer's steps faded, the keys no longer rattling, the lock secured once more, darkness settling in, and the world reduced again to waiting. Even in that silence, the thought of the key remained. Somewhere, in someone's pocket or at someone's belt, it existed, and perhaps, one day, it might turn again. In this way, even the harshest keys carried a kind of strange comfort, not for the captors, but for the captives. Because as long as the key had not been destroyed, as long as it still hung heavy on a ring, there was always the whisper of possibility, and sometimes that whisper was enough to survive another night.